I'm pleased to present our chef, Jim LaPerriere, owner of Distinctive Dining. He'll be preparing some unique side dishes, fried asparagus, and I think he has some other good things up his sleeves. He began his career as a chef in the early 80s, cooking at a number of prestigious restaurants in Sacramento. After working as sous chef for 6 years for Italian chef Biba Caggiano, LaPerriere studied at the Culinary Institute of America, where he graduated #1 in his class. Upon graduation, LaPerriere worked in Napa Valley, taking time to travel throughout Mexico to experience the regional cuisines there. LaPerriere is now the owner of Distinctive Dining in Saugus, where he focuses his talent and creativity on private events from demonstration dinners to weddings, wine dinners, and private group cooking classes. He is a strong believer in the farm-to-table approach and often can be found here at the farmers market searching for the fresh local products available. I present Chef LaPerriere.
Welcome to the farmers market and to this amazing weather finally. I'm sure we are all glad to have it. Yes? No? I mean, I'm sure the snow will return soon if that's what you want. I've been out here 6.5 years now from California, and my saying now is, you know what it means when the weather and spring and summer arrive? Winter's just around the corner. So, I'm sorry, that's kind of mean. But anyways, so with this nice weather, we have some great produce. A lot of this is from the market here, and then all these herbs right here I just cut out of my garden this morning. It's amazing what a little warmth will do for the garden. So today I wanted to do a few of my favorite things, a couple things that are recent on my menu when I do events that have been kind of popular. One is I call them asparagus fries. And so we're just going to do a nice little light tempura on some asparagus spears and fry them and make a mayonnaise-based sauce with sorrel. And sorrel, I'll explain in a minute. We're going to make a pesto and mix it with some mayonnaise as the dip for the fried asparagus. And then I'm going to show you a real simple salad that takes advantage of strawberries this time of year since they're just coming into season. And then I'm going to start out with a beverage which I see a number of regular faces here. They probably have even had this at one of my classes or at one of my events. This I think I did 3 years ago here too. So if it's a repeat, I apologize, but it's so good. I always like to remind people, make this during the spring and the summer because it's so healthy and tasty and easy to do. So this is called an agua fresca. Who's heard of an agua fresca before? Not many. Who's been to Mexico? You may have had one and not even known it, okay? These are found all over Mexico. You'll go into grocery stores or little outlets along any street, and they'll have these big 5-gallon glass jars, maybe 4 or 5 different flavors, sitting up on the shelf that were made that morning. And they're just fruit waters, okay? And all you need to make an agua fresca is some fresh fruit, preferably something in season, all right? Strawberries, there's maybe one booth here that has strawberries today. Whatever fruit's in season, preferably at its peak of ripeness, you throw it in a blender. You don't even need a recipe. I gave you one, but you don't even need one. You throw your fruit in the blender, you add some water, okay, and then we're going to basically puree it with just a little bit of sweetener. And so, by the way, melon ball scooper is a great little tool for the tops of strawberries. You can go spend more money on a strawberry detopper, but that works just fine too. I like to use a little organic cane sugar. Just enough water in there to get a puree. And then today I'm going to infuse this with some lemon verbena. Who's never had lemon verbena? Okay. You need to go down in CK and get some lemon verbena. And I've got a few of her cards up here that I will leave. Westview Farms. She's all the way down on the left, and I get a lot of my culinary herbs from her. Lemon verbena, kind of a funny analogy. Who remembers what Fruit Loops taste like? I'm going to pass pass this around. And just, I want you to pass that around and just smell it. Tell me it doesn't remind you of Fruit Loops. So anyways, it's got a great citrusy, kind of a tropical citrusy aroma and flavor to it. And so there's some right here. This is out of my garden. So we're just going to throw a few sprigs of that in. You can always add more of something, so don't overdo it. A little bit of ginger I have in your recipe. I didn't have ginger with me today. You can either just peel it and slice a couple slices, or you can grate it. I think I have a teaspoon of grated on the recipe. And then just puree this really fine. Now, keep in mind when you puree something in a blender, especially something of color like blueberries, strawberries, or even herbs, the longer you puree it, the brighter that color is going to get. Okay, so if this happens to be a commercial blender, so it's a much higher powered, you might have to run yours twice as long to really get it pureed, get the flavor of that lemon verbena in there, and also to get that nice red color. If you don't puree it long enough, it's going to be kind of pale in color. Okay. So you take your fruit puree. This could be peaches in July, August. It could be apricots. It could be watermelon. I mean, any fruit works. You're going to put it in your pitcher, and you're going to add enough water to your puree just to get rid of that puree, that viscosity. Okay, so it's not watery, but just one step above. Okay, and then what you're going to do is you're going to taste it. All right, and it's going to be kind of flat because you just diluted it with a bunch of water. Okay, but because you're using really ripe fruit, you've got that nice strawberry flavor. So then what you're going to do is you're going to add a little more sweetness to it in whatever form. I usually at this point like to use a liquid sugar or something that's a powder that dissolves. So a lot of people are into the agave syrup. Okay, that's classic Mexican as well. That's a lot of times what they use. Okay, as an alternate, stevia extract. I like the powder. This one happens to be from Trader Joe's. Probably the best one I've had. This little container here has 622 servings. That's how sweet it is. Okay, so you only need like a little teeny pinch or a little shake. I'm just using both just to show you. Okay, and then you're going to stir that up. All right, and then you're going to taste it. And this is all about kind of tasting and adding, tasting and adding. You want the sweetness to be the same sweetness the fruit is if you're eating the fruit. It shouldn't be like Kool-Aid. And then you want the acidity to be the same acidity that the fruit has when you're eating it fresh. So it needs just a little bit more sweetener. Again, not to make it sweet, but just to bring the level of sweetness back to where the strawberries were. And then it needs a little bit more acidity. So lime juice is more traditional in Mexico. Lemon juice is fine, or you could even use citric acid powder. I mean, it's perfectly natural product, and half a teaspoon would make that whole thing, that whole pitcher tart. And then you wouldn't be adding lemon or lime flavor if you didn't want that. So then, again, give it a taste, and you just kind of go back and forth, adjusting it until you like it, however you like it. Throw it in the fridge, drink it all day long. I let my kids drink this unlimited. I usually use a little sugar to start it, but then I use stevia extract or agave syrup. So there's really not a lot of sugar in it compared to most of the drinks, sweetened drinks that you buy. Okay. So any questions on that?
Did you put in the lemon verbena?
Yeah, I pureed the lemon verbena right in there.
I didn't see
Yeah, and the ginger, I would just puree fresh ginger right in there too. The other option you have if you want to infuse a flavor like that is to make a simple syrup ahead of time, which is just equal amounts of sugar and water. So maybe a couple cups sugar, a couple cups of water. That won't yield 4 cups, it'll yield about 3 cups. Bring that to a boil for about a minute. Add whatever infusion you want. So a whole bunch of lemon verbena and chopped ginger, let it sit till it cools, strain it out, put in a container and put in your fridge, and now you have a lemon verbena ginger simple syrup that you can use to sweeten your iced tea or sweeten your agua fresca, anything like that. Okay? I encourage you, go home and make a picture. All right, so now I'm going to move on to this salad. This is a salad. It's pretty basic. It's not terribly creative, but there's a couple little things that make it stand out, and one of those is the dressing. What I like to do a lot of times when you're between seasons is use the dried version of a fruit, and then if you're in the right season, use the fresh version as well. So this salad you could really do all year long, but it's best in the spring and summer when strawberries are fresh and they're local. Of course, you can get strawberries year-round if you want. So what I do is take some dried blueberries, and you want to reconstitute them. So you could reconstitute them with water. However, if you reconstitute them with blueberry juice, or in this case, this is a blueberry pomegranate juice, and I typically use this Tropicana 50 because it's low, it's like half the amount of sugar. And reconstitute the berries in blueberry/pomegranate juice, or just blueberry or just pomegranate. You're just intensifying the flavor of that reconstituted berry, right? If you use water, you're watering it down, but not really, because the berry's flavor are already concentrated from being dry. So I bring that up to a simmer, and then let it sit maybe 5 or 10 minutes, all right, till the berries plump a little. If you want the berries to be really soft and plump, leave them in there longer. You could even simmer it for 5 minutes. If you want them still to be kind of dry, then just bring it to a simmer, turn it off, and drain them right away, and they'll still be kind of chewy. So you can play around with the texture of the dried blueberry that way. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we'll strain those berries and set those aside to cool. Now we want to take this juice that's now got some of the sugars from the dried berries in it, and we want to reduce that down so it's syrupy. And then this is going to be kind of the base for our salad dressing. Okay? Whenever you have a sugar ingredient that's syrupy, like molasses, maple syrup, honey, a little bit in a dressing, it's going to help emulsify that dressing so it's nice and almost creamy, if you will. It's not going to be oily and vinegar, separated like an oil and vinegar. Plus, it's going to intensify the flavor of your dressing, which is then going to obviously coat all the leaves, and it's going to add to the complexity of the salad, of the taste of the salad. So for the dressing itself, I always start with some shallots for the most part. Shallots are one of those magical ingredients in the onion family, and what's great about them is they've got a really intense flavor, yet they kind of just melt away if you mince them nice and small in whatever you put them in, whether it's a dressing where the acidity kind of softens them, or if you're sauteing them in a little bit of olive oil or butter. Because they're fairly intense, you always want to mince shallots. You don't want to like chop them rough and large like you would an onion. I apologize we don't have the mirror anymore. I asked about it and I guess it cracked. So, you can never go wrong starting and dressing out with shallots, a touch of Dijon. You don't need a lot, but if you want it to be more of a mustard style dressing, you could of course add more. All right, we've got some balsamic vinegar. Now, when you buy balsamic vinegars, there's a lot of different ones out there. Some are better than others. You really, if you want a really good quality, you want to look for a product that's balsamic vinegar of Modena, Italy, number one. You want to look for the government seal on there that says it's a true balsamic. And then, more importantly, go to the ingredients. And it should say grape must, concentrated grape must. Sometimes it'll say red wine vinegar as well. If it says caramel color, just pass it up and go to the next one and look. Because caramel coloring, number one, they've determined isn't good for us. And number two, it means it's not real balsamic vinegar. Okay? The true color and viscosity of a balsamic vinegar comes from that aging process. Okay? And that the natural reduction of the vinegar as it's let to sit in these wooden casks. Okay? So if you buy in bulk, Costco actually has a very good one. So, and it's economical. So again, basic dressing so far: shallots, vinegar, a little Dijon. If you can, always fresh ground pepper. If you've ever done a taste test of pepper that came out of a little jar you bought at the store, pepper that you ground a week ago, and pepper that just came out, 3 totally different quality levels of taste, if you will. Some salt. Okay. And then in this case, we've taken this down. You saw that was about 1/3 of a cup or so. We've taken that down to about a tablespoon. All right? Which has concentrated the flavor. My philosophy with salads and dressings, you want just enough dressing to coat the leaves, right? Because if you have too much dressing, the leaves they wilt right away, right? And then you don't taste the greens. So if you're only going to have enough dressing to coat the greens, then that dressing better have some flavor, right? So we got the flavor going from the reduction here. It's going to tie in with the blueberries that are in the salad. We'll let that cool a little bit before we add our other ingredients. Usually I'll make that syrup and let it cool by itself, and then I'll add it to the dressing. And then for the salad itself, we're going to take some fresh strawberries. And I mean, you could slice them, you can quarter them, however you want it to look in the salad. When I put fruit in a salad, I don't like it too thin. When you're eating your salad, you want to get a nice chunk of fruit to bite into, right? So we're just simply going to take our berries. We're going to put them in a bowl. And what happens when you sprinkle, you don't need much, a couple teaspoons. Happens when you sprinkle berries with sugar. They get juicy. They create their own syrup, right? Also makes the strawberries taste really good, huh? I mean, to take something that already tastes great and make it taste even better without too much sacrifice calorie-wise. So you can let this sit now. I mean, 10, 20 minutes is ideal, but today we're crunched for time, so we'll give it maybe 5 or 10. Maybe I'll start the other thing while these are sitting. Once that syrup kind of comes out, you don't need a lot. The sugar will have dissolved, and now those are the berries we'll use in the salad. So now when you bite into the strawberry, it's got that next level of flavor. And then also, we'll take the syrup from the strawberries and we'll add it to our dressing, right? So it's all about building these flavors. And the more complexity you can get in a recipe or in a dish, the more of the wow factor you're going to have when you bite into it. So remember too, you can always add more oil. So add your oil. I usually start 2 to 1. Taste it. It should be nice and acidic, but not where you're, cringing, right? Because if it's that acidic, your lettuce leaves are going to cringe when it hits your leaves. But the more oil you put, the more you dilute all the flavor you have in your base, right? So we'll set that aside for the time being. And then we've got some nice, you can buy the mesclun spring mix, all the baby lettuces. Some of the farms, Visser Farms donates to all these demonstrations, so we take whatever they can give us. And so, usually bite size is good when you're tearing up some lettuce. If you want more of a baby feel, then take the centers. These are a little bit wet. Normally I would spin dry these in a spinner because the more water you have on the lettuce, the more you're going to dilute that dressing that you just made. Red leaf, some curly leaf, and looks like we've got some nice butter or bib lettuce here. So we'll just take the center out of there. And then we've got some romaine here. Keep in mind too, these outer really big leaves tend to get a little bit bitter. So a lot of times I'll get rid of that kind of first layer. Anybody growing lettuce in their garden? It's just going crazy, huh? No?
I'm in Seattle, so
Oh, okay.
a little slower.
A little slower, yep. I just, this summer, or this school year, I started a school garden at Douglas Elementary. And we just finished planting with all the kids. One of the gals on our committee, she took it upon herself to organize every class of kids, and there's like 2 or 3 of every grade, 1st through 5th. And she got every single kid out there over the course of 2 weeks physically planting seeds and stuff. So now we've got, Three Sisters garden, and we've got arugula and lettuces and strawberries and herbs and carrots and beans. And so it's all the lettuces and herbs are doing really well. And then when they come back in September, it should just be lush. And it's an interior courtyard at the school. And so it gets all this sun, and for the 6 years I've been in the area and at that school, this courtyard had nothing in it. It was just dead grass and an old dilapidated fountain that didn't work in the middle. And so we decided to do something a little nicer. So if you're ever out that way, or you have kids or grandkids, go check it out. It's really neat to see these 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds out there eating arugula and liking it, Some kids have never even held a shovel before. It's amazing. Okay, so there's our lettuces. May as well just finish this now. We've got our strawberries. Dump our syrup in there. And some of our dried blueberries.
Can you use fresh blueberries?
Sure. Right, obviously they're not in season quite yet, but fresh blueberries. I like using fresh and the dried. So you get the dried intensity in the dressing, scatter a few on top, and then some fresh blueberries on or mixed in too is great. And then again, a little bit of salt and pepper. You want to progressively season things when you're seasoning. We season the dressing. You also want to season the greens. All right, and then some toasted almonds. And then what I like to do instead of croutons is just take some good artisan style bread. This is a homemade 90% whole wheat sourdough that I make. And so I just put it in the toaster until it's nice and toasty. And sometimes I'll put olive oil on it and put it back in. So it's like a crouton, but it's crispy on the outside and chewy in the middle. Yeah, yeah, or even olive oil the bread and put it on toast, or toast it and then just put some olive oil on it. Yep. And it's my favorite way to do a tomato mozzarella salad now. Instead of slicing tomatoes and cheese on a platter and drizzling it, I dice it into cubes, and the tomatoes and the cheese, and throw the basil, and then I take the toasted, chewy, crunchy sourdough while it's warm and toss it in with a ton of extra virgin olive oil, and then the bread soaks. It's like a panzanella salad, but it's not got the red wine vinegar and the garlic and all that. It's just the extra virgin olive oil, good sea salt, and the tomatoes, basil, and mozzarella. Yeah, but then the bread soaks up all the oil and the juice from the tomatoes, and it's really satisfying. We'll be doing that this year at your event. And then when you plate a salad, kind of let everything fall to the bottom. Get all your greens on top. Or even if you're having a party and you're serving it in a big bowl or platter, always put your greens on and then put all the good stuff on top. Because as you're eating the salad or as people are taking it out of the big portion, all that stuff's going to start falling to the bottom anyways. And then some good local goat cheese. This is called a croton. It's an aged goat cheese. Country Winds Farms down far left. They sell this. So it's almost like a brie, but it's not as soft and creamy as a brie. But you can see it's got a little bit of an aged edge on there, and then it's really creamy in the middle. So you can either just break this up, or you could slice it and do slices. I typically don't toss goat cheese with the salad because it tends to break down, and then it makes everything really heavy on the greens. I'd rather just get a nice bite of goat cheese here and there. However, if you want to do more of a creamy goat cheese dressing, then just whisk some goat cheese into your dressing. Okay, that's an option too. All right. Thank you. It's really a shame we can't taste out here. I know I can, but. All right. Any questions on the salad or the dressing or salads in general?
Question about the vinegar.
Yes.
How long can you keep vinegar?
Vinegar will keep forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and longer. Pass it on. Yeah. It's shelf stable. You don't have to refrigerate it. The only thing that might happen is after years it may start to concentrate from evaporation, right? But if it's got a tight lid on it, it should be fine. Yep. You can also, any vinegar, but balsamic, because it has a natural sugar content, it's great for reducing, just in a good, small stainless steel pan on a low heat for as long as it takes to take whatever amount you started with and reduce it by half. But let it go nice and slow. You almost don't even see any bubbles. You see some steam coming off, and you'll concentrate the flavor, and then when it cools, it's kind of syrupy. And it's great for, it's even good drizzled over ice cream, or drizzled over brie or whatever. Added to a mayonnaise for a balsamic mayonnaise. All right, so let's move on to our asparagus fries. So I started doing these a few years ago, and I think I had green bean fries on a menu somewhere, and I thought, well, why not do asparagus fries, right? Green beans aren't quite ready yet, and so it's proven to be really popular for hors d'oeuvre at a lot of my events. Even at home occasionally I'll whip up a batch. I've got asparagus growing in my yard now, and I've had 2 years of it's been mature enough to pick, so it doesn't get much better than that. However, you can also do it with green beans. You can do it with any vegetable. Squash blossoms. Oh, look at that zucchini. Squash blossoms and baby zucchini are great this way as well. So as a chef, you don't want to just do a fried asparagus. You've got to call it something fancy like asparagus fries. And then you're just not going to do battered fried. You're going to come up with something more interesting. So I came up with a summer shandy tempura batter. So do you have to use summer shandy? No, but summer shandy has that nice lemony characteristic, which obviously goes well with asparagus. If you don't have summer shandy, which I didn't make it to the store, any beer will work fine. If you don't want to use beer, you could use, if you want to get fancy, you could use champagne, sparkling cider, seltzer water, but anything carbonated is what's going to help you get that nice light tempura effect, okay? And then the other key is a nice light flour or dry mix, okay? So this one is based on a recipe from a restaurant in San Francisco called Boulevard, one of my favorite restaurants in the entire country. And it's cornstarch, cake flour, baking powder, salt, and I put a little bit of rice flour in there as well, which makes it even lighter. And then depending on how thick you make it, gives you different results. So if you want a really light, thin, crispy coating, then you can make it almost watery, okay? It won't even look like it's sticking to the asparagus, but when you fry it, you get this really thin coating. If you want it thicker, like fish and chips, then you just leave the batter thicker. You put less beer or more other ingredients. And then really the only thing is you don't want to open the beer or make the batter more than an hour ahead, half hour ahead. Because the more carbonation you have, the better your tempura is going to come out, okay? And so while we're doing this, I'll also talk a little bit about deep frying and things to look for, things to keep your food at its best. Also help you understand that fried food doesn't have to be as bad as people think it is for you, especially with a batter like this. It's probably, if you do everything correctly, no different in calories than if you took asparagus and tossed it in some butter or olive oil, okay? But I'll talk about in a minute the things that will prevent the oil from letting you have a nice light, and as opposed to a heavy, greasy product, which a lot of people experience in restaurants, unfortunately. So while that oil is heating up, we're going to make our pesto. So who's never had sorrel? A few people. All right, so let's do this. Let's just pass some of this around. So just feel free to tear off a piece and just eat it, chew on it. And what you'll find is as you're chewing it, all of a sudden it gets really intensely acidic, kind of sour. Not so much acidic, just sour. It's a little bit like a spinach leaf, but it's got a nice lemony tartness to it. And the great thing about sorrel, unlike basil, it doesn't turn brown or black like basil does. So that's years ago I thought, well, why not make a pesto out of sorrel? Same way you would make with basil, but just substituting the sorrel. And so one of my favorite ways to use it is to make a sorrel pesto and serve it with grilled lamb, because lamb likes a nice lemony, citrusy type of sauce. And then when I started doing the asparagus fries, sorrel's in season the same time asparagus, and typically things that are in season together go well with each other. Asparagus also likes lemon or acidity. I thought, well, let's do the sorrel pesto, but make more of a mayonnaise out of it for the dip for the asparagus. And so that's kind of how it evolved. So you could use any pesto recipe and just substitute sorrel for basil. And this stuff's a perennial. Kay sells it down there as well. And really, all you got to do is just strip the leaves off. Especially these thicker stems can be a little bit fibrous. Whoops. And yeah, I started with 2 plants 6 years ago when I moved here. Now I've got 8, and this was all off. It's about 3/4 of one plant, so they can get quite bushy. And as they start to, you get shoots that come up that want to start bolting. Just cut it all back, and they'll keep coming all summer long. And then comes back next year, can dig it out, divide it, plant more if you want, give it away, give it to friends, make sorrel pesto and market it. I don't know.
What else do you do with it?
Classically, sorrel, which by the way is in the buckwheat family, classically in French cooking, and if you've never had sorrel with salmon with sorrel sauce, it's so good. You basically sweat a bunch of shallots in a little bit of butter, and add a little bit of wine and a splash of vermouth and a whole bunch of sorrel, and cook it down until it melts and gets all wilty, and and then add a little cream and serve it like that, or you can puree it into more of a creamy sauce. And it's just, can't even explain it. It's just salmon and sorrel. It's like peanut butter and jelly. It just goes really well together. It's also great when the leaves are tiny, when they're nice and tiny, about that size or smaller. I plant it next to my lettuce. I plant my lettuce near my sorrel. Then I just, as I'm picking lettuce and throwing it in a bowl for a salad, I put a bunch of sorrel leaves in there too, because it gives you that nice lemony kind of citrus flavor. All right, that's probably enough. And then some garlic. Can't have pesto without garlic. The amount of garlic is up to you, obviously. Some people like more, some people like less. But keep in mind when you're cooking, you're trying to balance all your flavors. So too much garlic, that's all you're going to taste, right? So you have to kind of find that fine line. Too much garlic, too, can make it a little bit spicy. Has anybody ever planted garlic? Use it when it comes up in the spring? Yeah. Spring garlic, I'm seeing more and more. 1 or 2 farmers have it here year-round. So anybody that gardens, or even if you don't, if you've got a nice patch of soil somewhere, just take your cloves of garlic, either in the fall or right when the snow clears, except this year. And you know how sometimes you get a little shoot in the refrigerator? Okay, that's the sprout side up. Just take your finger and just poke some holes in the soil about this deep. Plop your clove in and cover it with dirt and just let it go. And springtime, you're going to end up with a shoot looks like a green onion. Okay, and at that point, until about mid-June, you can just pull that out of the ground and use it like a leek or a green onion all the way down. And it's a nice mild garlic flavor. Okay, it hasn't formed any paper husk. And so what happens is this little clove the host that you started with, that little shoot is your new head of garlic, right? But as it starts out, this one kind of breaks away, kind of like the space shuttle, and it just disintegrates, decomposes into the soil, and you have a whole new shoot of garlic, which if you pull it by mid-June, it's like a scallion. If you let it go till August, September, it actually forms another whole head of garlic with all the paper around it. And then in September, you pull that whole thing up, and you lay them out and you let them dry, and then you've got garlic for the entire winter. I still have garlic I pulled up last year that is still fresh, and it's been on my countertop. It's not soft or anything. So I just once I pull them out of the garden and I wash them off really good and just lay them out to dry. And yeah, there's smaller heads, but the garlic's still good 9 months, 10 months later without even refrigerating it. All right, so got our garlic, some good Parmesan cheese. So when I say good Parmesan, that doesn't mean the shelf-stable green can on the starts with a K, ends with a T, middle letters RAF. Grana Padano and Reggiano are the two upper-tier Parmesans from Italy. Okay, Parmigiano Reggiano is most expensive and considered the best. Grana Padano, very similar, different region, about a third less in price, and just as good in something like this. You know, if you're just going to eat chunks of cheese, then the Reggiano is great, or you're going to grate it over a risotto or something. The Reggiano is fantastic, but I typically use the Padano for things like this. So, and I call it a Sorrel Parmesan aioli, so I go a little heavier on the Parmesan. And then pine nuts, if you've got pine nuts. If not, a lot of regions in Italy use walnuts instead of pine nuts for pesto, and I was out of pine nuts, so we're going to use walnuts. You could even use almonds for you can use any nut for pesto. You can use macadamia nuts, do a tropical pesto if you want. Garlic, pine nuts, Parmesan, a touch of salt, a little bit of ground white pepper. Ground white pepper is not something most people have in their pantry. It's in every single restaurant kitchen I've ever worked in. You don't need very much, but again, it's like shallots. It's one of those flavors that kind of adds to the complexity of a dish without you really knowing what is it that made that taste that way. If you took black peppercorns and just took that black outer husk, if you will, off, the white peppercorn is what's left. So you're getting rid of that flavor of the black outer part and just focusing on the white inner kernel of the peppercorn, which is where most of the heat is as well. All right, where is my top? Now, if you're going to use the pesto in a mayonnaise, you don't want it too thin or too oily, because mayonnaise is an emulsion. And if you make homemade mayonnaise, you know there's a ratio. There's egg yolk, and there's mustard, and there's oil, and then lemon juice or vinegar. Well, one egg yolk can only hold about 3/4 of a cup oil maximum in an emulsified state. So if you made a batch of mayonnaise, right, with one egg yolk and a little Dijon and 3/4 cup, it's at its max. And now if you go to whisk in pesto that's oily, you went over, and now the whole mayonnaise batch is just going to get it's going to break and be all oily. Does that make sense? So mayonnaise that you buy is emulsified. Same thing, if you were to put it in a bowl and start whisking more oil into it, it'll get to an oversaturation point and it'll just break. So you want your pesto to be on the thicker side if you're going to mix it into mayonnaise. All right, so we've got some mayonnaise here. Who here makes their own mayonnaise regularly? Who here has never made mayonnaise? All of you people should make it at least once, and I guarantee you it won't be the last time. It's so easy. You throw your bowl on, you get pasteurized egg yolk in the carton, like egg beaters, works fine. A couple tablespoons of that, a tablespoon of Dijon, put the lid on, and then you very slowly drizzle, either in a measuring cup, or these squirt bottles are great. You just drizzle it in like that, slow to start as it's on high speed, and it will slowly emulsify into the yolk and the mustard. And you know, you do 2 egg yolks, you can do about a cup safely, cup of oil, and then put it in a bowl and add your lemon juice or vinegar. I like lemon juice, and salt to taste. And you've got homemade mayonnaise. It'll last for a week, 2-3 weeks in the fridge. With pasteurized egg yolk in there, it's not really going to go bad. It just, the flavor might start getting a little bit kind of off. But you can make a nice, rich, extra virgin olive oil mayonnaise that way, if you like that flavor. So now we have our Sorrel Pesto Mayonnaise. This is good on a spread for a sandwich with some turkey. It's good as a dip for chips. It's, of course, great for the asparagus fries. I do about equal amounts. Now this, again, this isn't going to really go bad in the fridge, but because of the garlic and the nuts and everything, it will, after a few days, the flavor starts to change. It just doesn't taste as fresh, if you will. It's always best the day you make it. Any questions on pesto? All right, so our oil, when we deep fry, 360 is kind of the magic number, all right? At least for anything that's kind of battered, okay? If you're doing maybe a garnish, like fried shallots or something delicate like that, it doesn't have to be 360, they'll burn. Anything that's got a sugar content, like onions have natural sugar, and leeks have, some natural sugar. Potatoes, the starch, and if you're doing like a really fine julienne fried potato, kind of like those potato sticks you buy in a can, if the temperature is 360, the outside's going to burn before it's crisp all the way through. So, but for all intents and purposes, 360's the number you're going to look for if you're battered and fried items. Okay, number 2, maintaining that temperature or close to it during the frying is super important as well. Obviously, if 360 is important and you put a bunch of food in, you put too much for the amount of oil or for the capacity that your stove has to reheat it, and the oil drops to 290 or 300, you're right, you may as well started frying at 300, right? So maintaining that temperature, and you do that based on how much food you put in, again, depending on how much volume and how much firepower you have under it. This is an infrared thermometer, so it only does surface temperatures, but it's great for things like deep fryer. I hate the probes. They always fall over into the oil and things like that. So these are very handy. You can find these online, as everything else in this world. Good old Amazon. Occasionally, like Costco had these for a while, but they came with a moisture meter. We all need a moisture meter, right? Everybody taste the sorrel? You like it? It's kind of neat, huh? Yeah, it's good stuff. All right, so we are there. So if 360 is the magic number, what I typically do is I go to about 370, 375. So when I put my food in and the oil temp drops, it's not dropping as far under 360 as it would if I started at 360, but it's also not going to stay at 375 for more than about a second, okay? So you can use any size asparagus. Asparagus only needs, like if you put it in boiling water, it only needs like 30 seconds to cook this size. And it's still got a nice crunch to it. Some people don't like the crunch, cook it a little longer. You see recipes that say cook your asparagus soup or blanch your asparagus for 5 minutes. Don't. You're going to lose that nice bright color. You're going to lose all the vitamins, all the flavor. And then I just, typically they have their natural breaking point. You know, this is tough and this is tender. If you've got the really fat ones, even after you snap it, sometimes you still need to peel some of that outer skin. But this size, typically, once you snap it, it's fine. So once you kind of know, based on the asparagus you bought, where that point is, you can just cut them. If you want your fries a little shorter, then just shorten them a little bit. Okay, so with the batter, the consistency is right now, you can still see the asparagus. See how thin that is? So in a pot that size, you might do 6 or 8 at a time. Obviously, you're kind of putting them in one by one. So if you put too many, by the time you put the last, the first is done, and then it's hard to tell. And then, so see, it's still at 364. So that's perfect. Now, too hot to start can be a problem too, especially with a batter like this. The oil's too hot, and the asparagus goes in. It's so violent in there, the batter comes off. So there's a kind of a fine line. Give it 20, 30 seconds to set before you even try to touch it. Otherwise, they might stick, or they might to each other or your strainer. And then just give them a flip. And again, try to maintain 360, 365. We're at 362 right now. So at that temperature, you're going to minimize the fat that gets absorbed into your coating. Okay? When the batter hits the oil, it seals. Okay, and then it's not absorbing the oil anymore. Asparagus isn't going to absorb the oil. All right? And with a really thin coating like this, there's only so much oil it could absorb in a worst case scenario. Okay, and then the best thing to do is always shake off as much of the oil over that pot as you can, and then put it on a wire rack. A lot of people like to put it on a paper towel. Put it on a paper towel is going to absorb that excess grease, and then the asparagus is going to sit in it. Doesn't make sense. Let it cool on a rack, and these asparagus actually will stay crispy sometimes for 10, 20 minutes. You can actually warm them in the oven. Of course, they're never as good as when they're right out and cooled just enough that you can tolerate them.
Sir,
Yes?
you have to rush out and buy rice flour and...
No, you don't have to rush out and buy rice flour. I just use that as an example of how you can play around with the finished product. You could change the ratio of your cornstarch and cake flour. You could try it with regular flour. All kinds of different results you can achieve. This is just a really nice, light combination. And the idea here is to have basically as thin a coating as possible and still have a crunchy exterior, okay? Because then the vegetables really stand out, the flavor and texture and all that.
If you were doing the baby zucchini, how long would they have?
So here's what I do, same amount of time. What I typically do with the zucchini this size, I just did a dinner a few weeks ago where for the vegetable on the main course, it was ribeye steaks and filet mignons, and I just served these whole fried, a couple of them on the plate. But what I did is score the zucchini in quarters lengthwise, like that. So then they cook faster, and then the batter gets in between them all. Yeah, fried, if you've never had fried zucchini flowers, they're fantastic. But what makes them even more fantastic is when you stuff them with a little bit of goat cheese, and then you batter them and you fry them. Well, I'm sure many of you have had that before. Every day, right? So then this is a lot of times how I'll serve these guys. And also, you want to make sure when you season fried food, you season it right when it comes out while it's still a little bit wet, because then the salt will stick. So now if we're going to do the zucchini, and green beans, especially the ones that are coming in just a few weeks, the little baby, almost like the haricot vert style, Blue Lakes, they're fantastic like this. So yeah, so these guys, just so you can kind of see what they look like when they're done. You know, this isn't something you're going to probably make for yourself every night, but it's you know, fried food is kind of a special occasion thing, or you're entertaining, or in my case, it's always really entertaining, and people are looking for a distinctive, as I call it, a distinctive dining experience. They don't want just the plain old food that you can get anywhere, and so it allows me to be creative and allows them to get something a little bit different. And when people are paying for a service like that, they typically want to indulge a little bit. And really, it's better to have more oil than not enough in your pot, so they have room, just kind of swim around and flip them. Any questions on deep fat frying? Type of oil, any high heat oil. So that would be canola oil, peanut oil, corn oil, grapeseed oil, olive oil. Regular olive oil is good for deep frying. Extra virgin olive oil, you can. It's very expensive because you use a lot of it, and it also the oil breaks down. It has a lower tolerance for the high temperatures. But in Italy and Spain, and Greece, they fry in extra virgin olive oil all the time.
That's a lot of oil. Can you use it over again?
You can, yeah. Unless I'm doing seafood, you know, or meat, what I'll do is once the oil cools, so it's warm but not totally room temp, I'll put it through a really fine strainer, like cheesecloth fine, and then I'll put it in like a heavy freezer Ziploc bags, and I'll put it in the freezer. And it'll keep forever, like that. And like this oil here, could use probably 2 more times. You may have to add another cup to it or whatnot, but yeah, I reuse it all the time. But if you strain it and put it in your cupboard in a dark place for a month, sometimes it starts to get kind of rancid tasting. So either refrigerate it or freeze it. And when you freeze it, all you got to do is run the bag under hot water for about 3 seconds. Slit it with a knife and it comes right out into your pan.
Jim, if you do a stuffed blossom,
Yeah.
any difference on oil temp?
Stuffed blossom, 360. The only thing you need to do is, what you want to do with your blossom is you want to open this up. I'll just rip this one open so you can see. And you want to cut out that, what that's stamen, is that what that's called? You want to cut out that little stamen because they're kind of bitter. So you would do that, you know, gently without, like with a little pair of scissors, just kind of open this up on one side like that. You can get the bug out of there too at the same time. Take that little guy out, and then put your little piece of goat cheese in there, and never try to overstuff it. It's easy. You want to put a bunch of filling in things, right? You want just enough so that when you fold this, you can overlap the leaves by a ½ inch or so to hold it in there. And then when you batter it, that'll seal. But if if the seams are just meeting like this, then you put it in the fryer, the oil is gonna get in, it's gonna be a mess. Yeah, so. All right, so there's the asparagus fries and the zucchini flowers and the sorrel pesto mayonnaise. You could use any tartar sauce. If you like it spicy, sriracha chili sauce and mayonnaise with a little garlic and lime juice is a great dipping sauce for fried food. But yeah, so go buy some asparagus and fire up your fryer. Thanks. If you didn't get any brochures or you're interested, there's some up there. I've got some here as well. For those of you that don't know, I'm basically a private chef. I'm your personal chef if you're looking for a distinctive dining experience. Small, large. I do a number of weddings now every year. But what I do a little differently is, if it's a dinner party, I come to your house and I cook everything on site. So it's like going to a 5-star restaurant, having it come to you. Drink your own wine, relax all night. Can be interactive if you want. And then larger events like weddings and graduations and things like that. Again, I cook everything on site. I don't cook it, carry it, hold it, rewarm it. So it's always very fresh, and I always start here at the market as far as shopping, and then amend with grocery stores, at least this time of year. So if that's something you're ever interested in, my brochures and contact information are there. And thanks for coming out, and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.